It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello again, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to help children, teenagers, and young adults around the world who are dealing with issues such as child abuse and neglect, bullying, mental illness, suicide, bullycide, addictions, you name it. We're also helping them have a better understanding of mental health and what they can do and what adults can do around the world to help educate and empower our kids to give them a better chance at life. And as you know, it's a harsh world out there right now. So today we're actually going to be talking about addictions. And I think it's important to note that whenever we talk about mental illness, child abuse, neglect, foster care, even adoption, and bullying, we have to remind ourselves that substance abuse and addictions play an important role. So many kids turn to substances and alcohol as a way to help them cope with the behaviors and life stresses that they're having to deal with, and with the emotional pain and confusion if they're struggling with a mental illness or if they're dealing with abuse. It is an outlet. And sadly, what we have seen over the past decade is that addiction amongst our kids has increased rapidly. Now, we're all very familiar with the news stories about the opioid addiction epidemic that's going on globally. And I think what we need to remember is that whilst that is something that we must be very cautious of and very wary of and educate our kids, it's some of the other substances that are more commonly being used. For example, in 2016, more than 1.4 million teenagers in the USA alone required treatment for addiction. Now we know that that is going to be much higher for 2020. 1/4 of high school seniors use heroin or marijuana regularly. 33.2% of grade 12 students drank alcohol on an ongoing basis every month. 19.7% of grade 10 and 8% of grade 8 students, remember this, grade 8 students, drink alcohol consistently on a monthly basis. How scary is that? And remember, their brains are not fully developed. Kids' brains do not fully develop until they're in their 20s. So imagine what damage that's doing to the growing and developing brain. 1/3 of teenagers who died by suicide were found to be intoxicated. Very scary stats. And even though these are from the USA, this is true of Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. This is a global problem. So it's appropriate that today's guest is an expert in addictions and in the treatment and support of teenagers. Michael Giresi is the Director of Clinical Development at Family First Adolescent Services. Mike found his passion for helping others through his own journey of healing and recovery. He started his career in the mental health field working with adult clients who suffered from complex trauma and PTSD, as well as chemical and process addictions. He has since traveled to India to study and become certified in yoga and meditation. Mike is a Florida certified addiction counselor and an internationally certified alcohol and drug counselor. Mike is also a nationally certified trauma professional through Spirit to Spirit Trauma Healing and a certified neuroaffective relational model practitioner, NARM, N-A-R-M. He's also a consultant and training assistant through the NARM Training Institute. As a training assistant for the NARM Training Institute, Mike travels the countries to help teach clinicians the NARM approach to working with issues stemming from attachment, relational, and developmental trauma. In addition, Mike is a national speaker and educator on the topics of developmental trauma, addiction, and adolescent treatment. So before I say any more, we're going to take a very quick commercial break. And when we return, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk with Mike Giresi. We'll be right back.
For more information about Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses from Tracey herself, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. Be sure to catch the latest news on mental health and Tracey's guests on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. While you're visiting TraceyMaxfield.com, make sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Keep track of Tracey with upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles on important mental health issues. Plus, when you subscribe, you'll get a copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. For more information and to sign up, go to TraceyMaxfield.com. Parents, do you worry about your children or teens? Do they have issues they don't talk to you about? Go to TraceyMaxfield.com to sign up for Tracey's informational courses. Tracey has brought connection to parents and teens all over the world. To learn more, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. A brighter future is possible.
So welcome back, everyone. And as promised, I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk with Michael Giresi. Michael, thank you so much for being on my show. I am so honored. I'm really excited to talk to you.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Tracey.
So let's go back to the very beginning. What prompted you to do this type of work?
Well, it really all started when I started my own journey of healing and recovery. I went to treatment in my early 20s, and I was just broken and in so much pain, and I had absolutely no idea why. I was hooked on a lot of different drugs and drinking, and going to treatment was really my first experience of ever even exploring or talking about mental health.
Okay, so can I ask, how old were you when you first started turning to substances and alcohol?
I was, when it really was started to become an issue was around 16.
Wow. Okay.
And, but I had dabbled even earlier than that.
Right. Okay. And so fast forward, when you recognized the need to get help, what did that look like?
It was pretty much, you know, in 12-step communities, I think they describe it really well. I came to this point where I found myself not being able to live with the substances, nor could I live without them. Mm-hmm. And I was at this place where I didn't know what to do. I was broken and I needed help, but I didn't know how to ask for it. It felt too threatening to ask for help. Okay. And my family and friends really came in support of me in a way that without them, I have no idea where I would be today. And they got me the help that I needed.
So you said it really became a problem when you were around 16. Did you continue with school, or did you drop out, or did you find that you were engaging in more risky behaviors? Like, was there a moment where it was, I've got to do something, I can't go on?
Yeah, at that time, in my teenage years, I was actually pretty, on the surface of things, I looked pretty functional.
Right.
I
Yes.
got pretty good grades, not great grades. I was playing football at a pretty high level.
Okay.
On the surface of things, it looked like I had everything together.
Okay.
I was going to sign, I did sign a national letter of intent to play Division I college football.
Wow.
Everything looked, again, from the outside looking in, it
Yeah.
looked like my path was being paved and I was well on my way. And then it all really just fell apart.
Okay.
And I ended up going to school for a little while, and I was maintaining just a little bit off at college. And very shortly after that, I gave up football because it was just another thing that was in the way of me managing my pain through drugs and alcohol. And I didn't know that at the time,
Right.
but
Right.
that reflecting back, that's exactly what was going on. So I gave up football. I just started partying, and everything that was kind of looked functional on the surface ended up falling apart piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I ended up, I dropped out of school, had to go to treatment. My family confronted all the things that were happening, and that was the start of my journey.
Okay. So let's accompany you on your journey.
Yes.
So how long obviously you're always in a stage of healing and recovery. But about how long into treatment did you start exploring issues which had contributed to this addiction?
Well, I had, I have this experience. So I ended up actually going to treatment, real residential treatment, twice. The
Okay.
first time I went, I was so much trying to just like play this compliant card.
Okay.
That if I just did everything right, that everybody wanted me to do, I could, get out and
Mm-hmm.
keep doing what I was doing, just in a more functional way, was my
Right.
idea. And there was it was a psychologist at this treatment center who I was sitting with, and he was just asking me some curious questions about my life, and I sort of laundry listed some of the things that just had been going on in my life or that had happened to me and things like that. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this. He said, "No wonder you did opiates." And it was the first time anyone had ever met my substance use with compassion.
Right.
And I truly, even just talking about it, it makes me a little emotional, just how much that touched me. And, yeah.
It does, because I think we all need that support and validation from someone who says, okay, I understand. I mean, I've had a doctor say to me, after, they learned about my past and everything that happened to me, and say, well, no wonder you fell down the rabbit hole. And then when you, like you do, when you start looking back at everything and piecing it together, you kind of say to yourself, wow, well, yeah, no wonder. So I mean, yes, but we need that. It's that validation. It's that I get it. So did that then begin that self-exploration of what had happened?
In a way, it started little, but at least as much as I had capacity for at that time.
I understand. Yes.
And again, I was so much more focused on the behaviors that I thought, okay, so if I change my behavior,
Mm-hmm.
then all of this going to fix itself. I had this idea that the only reason I had ended up in the spot that I was in was because I had been doing the drugs and I had been drinking and I had been doing all of this stuff. I bought into the idea that this was about me and this was solely my fault.
Got it.
And which on some level was useful because I was able to shift some behaviors, but there were these deep underlying states that as my behaviors changed, the states of just a ton of pain and sadness and kind of unmetabolized anger and aggression, they were getting more intense because I had lost my solution
to dealing with them.
That pain. Exactly. So that's when I ended up actually relapsing in a way after that first treatment. In a pretty significant way, I got to the brink of losing my life.
Wow.
And that's when my family intervened again. And I was actually met by 2 police officers who they could have easily taken me to jail for what it was that I was engaging in with the drugs. And they looked at me, again, I'll never forget this. And they said, "Do you want help?" And I said, yes. And I just fell into one of their arms. And my family took me, and they allowed my family to take me to the hospital.
That's awesome.
I ended up going to the hospital, stabilizing for a few days, and ended up going to 3 months of treatment. And that's when everything really just kind of took off.
Right.
From there, of my own healing and discovering the things inside myself that I hated.
Right.
And really starting to shift some of those patterns of how I dealt with all that self-hatred.
Okay. So initially you started working with adults.
Yes.
And then what was the tipping point that you decided, no, I'm actually going to go with adolescents and kind of support them?
So it's funny. It's a funny story. It was very coincidental, I might say. So when the guy who owns the treatment center that I work for, he and I had a relationship back when I first tried to heal and get sober. Right. And I had lied to him about staying sober.
Okay.
And so when I got sober the second time, and I was really heavily engaged in 12-step communities, and
right.
I was doing step work, and I got to the 9th step, and I sought him out. I found him because we had lost touch, and I called him up and I made amends to him for lying to his face about what I was up to. And part of the amends process is I asked him, how could I make this right? Right. And he said, well, you're already doing it, right now, just by, taking care of yourself and reaching out. He said, the only thing I could ever ask of you is really just to stay in touch with me. Okay. And I'd love to hear from you. So every handful of months, I would call him just to check in and say hi, update him on how I was doing, and get an update from him on how he was doing. And he said one time I called him, I had just gotten back from India, I believe. I was doing a yoga teacher training, and he said, what are you up to? And I told him all the stuff. I was exploring all these different trauma trainings, and I was studying all these things, and I was working in treatment at the time with the adults. And I just got back from India and all this stuff. And there was like a short silence on the other end. And he said, do you want a job? And I said, well, I'd be willing to explore it. So he had me drive down. I was living a few hours north from where I am now in Palm Beach Gardens. And I drove down. He took me to the center and explained to me and presented to me all of what he was setting up, because he was really coming. It was brand new. He was working with teens and families and wanting to promote this healing much earlier than I got it.
Right. Yes.
And I was just so deeply moved by his mission. And I took a leap of faith and accepted the job and moved down here, and the rest is kind of history.
And there you are.
Here we are. I fell in love with it.
And as I said, I mean, grateful that you did that, because I always say, when you've been there, when you've kind of hit that rock bottom, and then, figured a way out towards that light, and to get a new purpose in life and begin on a new life journey, I think that's what resonates not only with people, but that really resonates with teenagers, I find, is when you can say, been there, done that, living proof you can get better, you can get out of it. So that's awesome. So now you're a certified addiction counselor and an internationally certified alcohol and drug counselor. That is awesome. And a certified trauma professional through Spirit to Spirit trauma healing. So tell me a little bit about that.
Spirit to Spirit is a trauma therapist program, training program designed by Judy Crane.
Okay.
Judy Crane was one of my first mentors in the field. She really helped me understand a lot of what it means to work with people in the addiction field that were struggling. Right. And what was really driving these compulsions, these behaviors. And it was a life-changing experience. The whole training is really geared around doing your own work. Okay. That to be able to be present with somebody to doing their trauma work, you have to have done your own, or at least be actively engaged in doing your own trauma work. Okay. That was really the big dive into my own personal self-discovery around some of these different dynamics that came forward from childhood and teenage years that I was still playing out as an adult.
Right.
And so, I absolutely love Judy, and I loved my experience with Spirit to Spirit. It changed everything it changed the trajectory for everything for me.
And so give us an example. What kinds of things would you do when you were engaged in Spirit to Spirit?
Well, they kind of give the full gambit of the different aspects of trauma work. Okay. That they touch on so many different things. One of the things I remember Judy saying always was that one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly.
For people struggling with trauma. And so you got to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it and see what works for people. And so I got this really cool introduction to just so many different modalities and so many different ways of approaching trauma work, from art therapy to psychodrama to narrative therapy and all these different kinds of things. It's one of the things that propelled me. She was so encouraging in terms of telling everyone that to seek more training, that this wasn't the end, that this introduction to all these different things, if you were interested in it, to go out and find more for yourself and continue learning, that you're never done learning. And I really ran with that, and I started doing all these other trainings, and it was really, really cool. And that's ultimately what brought me to what I'm really, really passionate now, which is, I think it might even be on your list. It's the neuroaffective relational model, or NAR. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yes, I mean, that's a perfect lead in. And so I've read a lot about it. I actually received their newsletters and information. But yes, tell us about NARM.
Yeah, so NARM, like I said, is called the neuroaffective relational model. It's a model specifically designed for working with attachment, relational, and developmental trauma, or what's kind of being coined as complex trauma in our field right now. And it's a psychobiologically oriented model. Psychobiological just meaning that we can't separate the mind from the body, that there's a functional unity between the psychology and physiology of a person.
100%, yes.
And that due to the framework of our early attachment experiences, our early, childhood experiences, this patterning gets laid down in both the brain and the nervous system, going to the root of who we believe we are and carried forward as what we refer to in NARM as adaptive survival styles.
Yes.
And these survival styles, it's a beautiful quote from Dr. Lawrence Heller, who created NARM, is that it's not actually what happened to you in childhood that's causing the pain and suffering for you in adolescence or adulthood. It's the persistence of survival styles that distorts present experience and create all of the symptoms and behaviors that people are struggling with. So, the NARM is such a beautiful model that has not only transformed my professional life, but my personal life, because in so many different ways that we might be able to touch on some of them, but just learning that I didn't have to drudge up what happened to me, that wasn't actually the point of the healing process, or at least in order to heal, that it was more about how I adapted to what happened to me in childhood and carried forward. And you don't need to go on an excavation mission to figure out how someone adapted to what happened to them, because how they adapted is playing out here in the moment.
In their present behaviors, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, what I love about that is, all the time I talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and we know what ACEs can do to the growing and developing mind. And whilst it usually plays out in later years, it's also playing out in adolescence. And I think one of the big fears with lots of people is if they've undergone significant trauma, it's that fear of having to relive it and go through that again. And what I love about NARM is that you don't necessarily have to go that deep to begin to understand what happened and how it's kind of made you what you are today, right now. That doesn't mean that you will still be that same person next week, because it'll help you open up and start evolving as the person that you want to be. And so, and that's why I love that. And that's another reason why I really wanted to have you on, because I know, as I said, every guest, we've all brought up ACEs. It's the buzzword right now, and it's vitally important, but it also scares a lot of people of, my childhood was so horrific, I can't go there. And it's like, well, you don't necessarily have to go there. We can take you to the door. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to open the door and walk in. So that's awesome. I love it. Love that. So examples, you said how it's also helped you personally. So what has it enabled you to do?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. The
Just you can give one example.
the I would say that one of the biggest pieces that I've taken from NARM has been to have a relationship with myself that is increasingly, as I continue this process of working with it, is increasingly more rooted in compassion, presence,
Self-love.
and curiosity. Because I was so unaware, as I was saying before, just how much of my identity was wrapped up in and rooted in self-rejection, self-hatred, shame, and I really took those things to be who I was. And the process of NARM has helped me to begin tracking and letting go of my own inner experience and how I'm relating to myself and others in a way that it is either serving deeper connection towards myself or serving disconnection from myself and others. And
Right.
It's been a very transformative process.
That's awesome. I love it. So now the work that you're doing, obviously with teens and young adults, and so let's say we have some teenagers watching this podcast today, hopefully, and they're struggling. Alcohol and/or substances. They kind of know things are going out of control, but there's that fear there, and that stigma and shame. Even though I'm aiming by talking about it all the time that we can finally eradicate that, but it's still around. What would you say to them?
Well, I think I'd start with probably the first question we always ask in every NARM session to any adult or adolescent, which is, what is it that you're truly wanting for yourself?
Right.
And beginning the process of exploring with them what it is that they want and what it is that's getting in their way of having it. Right. And often, if not always, what's getting in the way of us having what it is that we're truly wanting for ourselves are these patterns that were laid down really early on. That we don't allow ourselves to have what it is that we truly want because it feels deeply threatening. Right. Because to have what it was that we truly wanted in childhood, when you experience really intense adverse experiences, to have what you want, it wasn't safe.
Right.
And so we're still playing out that same relationship to ourselves and everyone else that we were playing out back then.
Yes.
To support them to gain more presence and curiosity, to bring more awareness to how it is that they're relating to themselves from where they're sitting, as opposed to where they were when these experiences were happening, is what really starts to create the space and cracks that we can support them to really move towards those things that they're wanting for themselves.
That's a good idea. Okay. Now, the same question, but to parents. So there's parents, family members who either know that their child or teenager is doing drugs, drinking alcohol to excess, or suspect they are. What would you say to them? What guidance can you offer?
I would say to get help as soon as possible. To seek support for both their son or their daughter, and to seek support for themselves.
Yes, that's crucial.
It is so incredibly important. I actually just got done, literally right before I joined you on the podcast, I got done with our 3-day parent intensive that we do, which is basically 8 hours a day and a room with me for 3 days.
Okay.
And exploring all of these patterns. And
Yes, yes.
the idea is that if we can, if as a family system, we
Yes.
can begin to shift how it is that we're relating to ourselves and our kids, our spouses, not through the lens of these early survival styles, then we can start shifting the patterns that are keeping us stuck
Yes.
and disconnecting us from each other. When those patterns start to dissolve and there's more space and room for relationship in the family system, there's less of a need to run away from the various kinds of disconnection and pain through drugs and alcohol.
I agree. Yes. And I think you said a great point, and I keep reinforcing this all the time. If your child or teenager receives support and help and counseling to help them learn what's been going on, whether or not they're dealing with bullying, or whether or not they're dealing with mental illness or addiction or neglect, if they're doing all the work and they are improving and changing their life, if you have not got that family unit involved to address their dynamics and how they respond to things and what they need to do, you can have a healed teenager returning to a home where the behaviors continue, and they're going to slide back in. Because I always support you've got to have a holistic approach to begin with. I'm a huge advocate of that, but also it's got to be the family. It's a family unit. And so you may be sending your 15-year-old daughter to rehab, but you've got to be following on to get help too. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to your teenager.
It's crucial. It's
Yeah.
crucial. One of my favorite quotes actually is from the famous Buddhist mindfulness teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. I have a little add-on to the end of it, but his quote is that the greatest gift that we could ever give to our children is our own happiness.
Yes.
And he said, and the reason is because they'll take responsibility for it.
Yes. I love it.
My little
Your
add-on
add-on?
to that is the equal and opposite is also true.
Yes.
They'll take responsibility for your depression, for your anxiety, for your workaholism, your alcoholism, for your stress, for everything, for your marriage issues, for your divorce. They'll take responsibility for all of it because they have to.
Yes.
They don't have choices like we have as adults, where if they're not getting certain needs met, or if they're in a situation that they don't want to be in, they can't just say goodbye. They can't just leave.
Yeah.
The only kind of option that they really have is to adapt. And children always adapt through self-rejection.
Yeah, classic example. Yes, and it is, but no, it certainly is. And I know I've spoken to lots of parents that are very much, I want the best for my child, but I'm not going there. I'm not going to go to therapy. I don't want them to open up, my vault. But sometimes the vault has to be opened for you to heal, to be that better person for your child. I mean, it's a two-way street. And I think, sadly, there are so many people out there in the world that have carried so much self-hatred and doubt, and so much from prior abuse and experiences that they lived with and adapted, that they carried into adulthood. And it's become such a part of their identity that just the fear of opening up, and you've seen that when you started with, I would imagine, adults, when you're dealing with complex trauma and PTSD. And it's, if you want to give that gift to your child of giving them the best chance ever at life, which I think nearly every parent wants to, sometimes you have to address what's gone on in your life, in your household, per se. So, yes.
Beautifully said. Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So we've got about 5 minutes left. And so for norm training, is it just off? So I would imagine it's across the USA. You say that you actually go and train others. And so it's implemented across the United States right now?
Yeah, so it was originally just out in California and Europe,
Okay.
but the
Okay.
last several years they've gone more east in the United States. We've had the institute has had trainings in Chicago and one in Florida. They've had a couple in Chicago, in Austin, Texas, several, Arizona. They're starting to spread, and there's just so much interest in the model,
Right.
and
Yes.
we can't pop up in enough cities in enough time. It's really exciting. But like I'll be out in. I was just in Austin, Texas, helping on one of the teaching teams, and I'll be in Phoenix, Arizona, in a couple of weeks on
Awesome.
another teaching team. So we're trying to spread it as quickly as possible.
And that's awesome because we know there is such a need. I
Yeah.
mean, there is such a need. And I love the program because it is individualized, but it's that whole holistic approach. And I mean, I'm much older than you. I'm probably old enough to be your mom, but I
No.
mean, yeah, right. I'm 56, and you know what? I'm still discovering myself, and I'm still learning all the time. And so I don't want to say it's a commitment because commitment sometimes scares people, but it's, you begin on a path where you don't necessarily see the end because it's got many twists and turns. But if you continue to walk that path, you discover so many more things, not only about yourself, but about life, which actually only enhances the quality of your life. And, I believe everyone should really start engaging in that because very few people can truly say, oh, I had a perfect childhood. And even if they had a perfect childhood, they have encountered some traumatic event throughout their life. We know there's adult workplace bullying going on, which is, become in itself an epidemic. It's so out of hand. And we know that the person that's bullying has some significant trauma that they've had in their life. And this is how it manifests. But I love NAM. And actually, I just got notification from them today about all the different things. So I thought, how timely is that?
Nice.
So, parting words as we draw to a close, and I just want everyone to know that after this interview with Michael ends, we actually will go to a commercial break, and all the links that Michael has shared so you can find out more, not only about him and the work he does, but also about NARM. I encourage you to take a look because just reading some of the information, you have aha moments. I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And it's just so, I call it soul enriching to learn more because the more we can help ourselves, the more we can go on and help other people.
Absolutely.
So, closing words. What words would you offer kids that are struggling right now? And I know we talked about it, the addictions and that they need to seek help. But as a teenager that went through it and now has come out the other end, you're talking, and I know you deal a lot with teenage boys, but we know girls also have addiction concerns. What words of guidance, of support would you offer them right now? Because they're thinking, I'm never going to get over this. My life is over. I'm worthless. What would you say?
Well, I think the best way of putting it would be that there are people out here who don't want anything from you, that have no agenda, that don't need you to be a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, be a certain way, that just want to be here with you and for you, and that believe that you're worth it and you are deserving of all things that you're wanting for yourself. Even though you don't believe that right now, you don't feel as though you deserve it or that you're worth it. I'm one of those people. I know a lot of other people that are
I
like
was one.
that, and there is hope.
Yes.
And if this is what I always say. My cell phone number is on the board in our treatment center. That if you ever need me, just call. I want to be here to help, and in any way that I can.
That's
So.
awesome. That's awesome. Yes, 100% support those words. There is hope. There is always hope. And you have got to believe that you are worthy of so much more and that you can fulfill your dreams. Just reach out. Michael, thank you. I've loved this. It's been so informative, and I know that it's going to resonate with so many people. So thank you so very much. And we'll be back after this commercial break.
Thank you so much, Tracey.
Thank you.
Michael Giresi is the Director of Clinical Development at Family First Adolescent Services. Mike found his passion for helping others through his own journey of healing and recovery. He started his career in the mental health field working with adult clients who suffered from complex trauma and PTSD. He's since traveled to India to study to become certified in yoga and meditation. Mike is a Florida certified addiction counselor and an internationally certified alcohol and drug counselor. Mike is also a nationally certified trauma professional through Spirit to Spirit Trauma Healing and a certified neuroaffective relational model practitioner, consultant, and training assistant through the NARM Training Institute. Mike travels the country to help teach people about the NARM approach to working with issues stemming from attachment, relational, and developmental trauma. He's a national speaker and educator on the topics of developmental trauma, addiction, and adolescent treatment. For more information on Mike or Family First Adolescent Services, visit him online at familyfirstas.com or find him on Facebook and Instagram at FamilyFirstAS.
Welcome back, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michael as much as I did. What a great story and what great work he's doing. Please do follow him on social media. Lots of great information on the Facebook page, and also check out NARM. As I said, I get weekly updates from them, so you're not bombarded all the time, and the information they share is really helpful, certainly as I'm on this journey and supporting and promoting how we can help our kids around the world with bullying, mental illness, addictions, etc. Certainly the information I read is helping me. So this wraps up another episode of Engage, Educate and Empower. I hope that you're enjoying the series so far. Any comments, positive or negative, please do drop me a line and let me know. Also, if there's any particular topic or guest that you would like me to interview, I welcome any suggestions. So in closing, I think I'd just like to reiterate Michael's words. To anyone out there, a child, teenager, young adult who is struggling, or with parents who want to reach out to their kids, there is help out there. You are not alone. There is help out there, and that you are worthy of help. And there is hope. Please believe you do not have to continue on this journey, on this path that you are on right now, that you are worthy of happiness and love and joy and so much more. Just believe, and there is hope. Thank you again, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Have a good week.